It was a bleak November day. The wind howled and a bitter chill filled the air. The fishing boat rocked and bobbed along as it headed back towards the harbour. Cassie was in the cabin below, cosy and snug beside the little heater. She was playing with her new toy cooker that her nan bought her for her 8th birthday. "Dinner's ready!" "I say, dinner's ready, Grandpa!" she hollowed. Grandpa smiled a weary smile on his old withered and wrinkled face. His grey beard and straggly hair were covered with a fine sea spray. It's not far now to dry land, he thought. "Be down soon!" he shouted to his beloved granddaughter. Jess was a year older than his sister. He looked at Cassie and tutted. "That's not real food," he said, while fiddling about with his Star Trek models. He lined each one up, ready for battle, with some strange green slimy alien creature. Grandpa was worried. The sea had turned rough, and there was a huge swell on the horizon. And it was coming in fast, too fast. Suddenly it hit them. The boat toppled over. Grandpa was flung into sea like a rag doll. The children were floating in the upside-down cabin. The hull of the boat had been ripped off and dark clouds hovered menacingly above them. Jess had Captain Kirk's feet stuck up his nose. Cassie had a bright red plastic plate balancing shakily upon her head. The sea calmed as quietly as it had erupted, and in the distance they could see Grandpa drifting towards the shore on the boat's remains. His arms were reaching out for his children. He was a broken man on a broken boat. The children soon fell fast asleep. They were cold, wet, exhausted from their ordeal. On and on they floated, 2 little children sleeping peacefully like cherubs, tiny angels in a vast ocean. But it was eerily quiet until... Hot, steamy breath with a sticky tongue slid slowly across Jez's face. He woke up, startled. "What is that? Where am I?" he cried. Cassie blinked and shivered. A big red ball with 2 black holes moved towards her. She tilted her head backwards, trying to focus. Then she pulled herself up and found herself staring into the biggest, most beautiful, deepest dark eyes she had ever seen, with eyelashes that went on forever. "Wow," she said. "Who are you?" The creature stepped back. Cassie and Jez stood up, took a proper look. Cassie's blonde, white, curly hair was almost invisible in the snow. Snow? Yes, there was pure white, soft snow all around them. She looked at Jez, who was shaking a cap of ice off his dark, tousled hair. They saw that the beautiful creature in front of them was a reindeer. It had the biggest red nose they had ever seen. The reindeer stepped back and gave a bow. "Hello," he said. "Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Rudolph. Now jump on my back. We need to get you into some warm clothes and get some hot food inside you." He gave them a big smile and a friendly wink. Jez was shaking and shivering and needed to eat, but first he had to know what was happening. "Where are we? Do you know where my grandpa is?" he asked, trying to blink back the tears. "You are in the North Pole," said the reindeer. "This is the home of Father Christmas. Your grandpa is fine, but he's worried about you. But we will get you home safely. We can't take you home until Christmas Eve, though. That is the only time that we have the freedom of the skies. On Christmas Eve, we take gifts around the world and spread joy, peace and love and happiness." Rudolph crouched down and snuggled into the snow. and Jez helped Cassie to get onto the reindeer's back. She gripped Rudolph tightly, but her tough big brother pulled himself up behind her, lovingly protecting her, keeping her feeling safe and warm. They trotted off. They were smiling with happiness, knowing that they were being looked after and one day would soon return to see Grandpa again. But deep below the ice and snow, the salty sea grumbled. Not too far away, the white frozen ground heaved heavily. Huge jagged cracks appeared and the sea burst through. As the ground parted, ice-cold waves licked along the edge of the hole, turning snow into glass, and as the sea tossed and turned, the waves licked higher and higher, splashing pools of seawater onto the snow. Small rivers trickled back into the hole, leaving behind mounds of tiny crystals that glistened like diamonds. Salt! The snow underneath the crystals melted, and the tiny diamonds flowed together to form the shape of a man. Then he rose, standing tall and proud. Mr. Salty was born. Now I hope you enjoyed the first part of our story. This will be continued next week. Please look for us. Thank you. Bye bye. Let me start by wishing you all a very Merry Christmas at part 2 of our Christmas story. We're back with the children, and the evening was drawing in. There was a cold, bitter wind blowing. Rudolph turned his head to comfort the children. "Not far now," he said. The children smiled. They soon arrived at the top of an ice peak, their eyes open wide at the beautiful rainbow of colours sparkling before their eyes. Music and laughter filled the air. Little elves dressed in green with big eyes and long white beards stood in a line as they passed presents along. There was a huge reindeer sleigh at the end of the row. It was as bright as the stars in the sky, twinkling and glittering under the bright moonlight. Two chubby elves were struggling to put one of the parcels in the bag. Their feet were slipping and sliding on the ice. 1, 2, 3, heave! They said, grunting away. With one almighty push, the present toppled over the top onto the others, ready to be delivered on Christmas Eve. "Welcome to the house of Father Christmas," said the reindeer. "Hooray!" cheered the children as they jumped up and down with joy. "Hold tight," said the reindeer. "Here we go," he was shouting as he skipped onto the path of ice. "Whee!" screamed children. Then thud straight through the doors of Father Christmas's house they came to stop on a fluffy rug in front of a nice warm log fire. Now Mr. Salty watched on. He was turning green with envy. "I want to be able to slide on snow and sit in front of that fire. If I can't enjoy Christmas, then they won't either," he said to himself. "I'm going to melt all the snow in the world, and no one can have Christmas ever again." He sighed. The elves were having a break from the work. They were putting the finishing touches on the biggest snowman ever. Hanging onto the snowman's bubbly hat, an elf stuck a large carrot into the snowman's face. Achoo! Sneezed the snowman. Mr. Snowy was born. Later that night, when the children were warm and safely tucked up in bed, Mr. Snowy peeped through the windows and gave them a little wave. The children gave him a little wave back. "I want to go home to my grandpa," whispered Cassie. "It is nice here, but I want to go home for Christmas." Tears fell slowly down her little red cheeks. Jess put his arms around his little sister. They looked at the window to Mr. Snowy. "Please take us home for Christmas," they cried. Mr. Snowy smiled tenderly. The children huddled together, their sleepy eyes getting heavier and heavier. The children had been staying with Father Christmas for a few days now. They were looking forward to going home, but they were having such a lovely time, watching the elves work and play. It was all fun and laughter. Father Christmas told them bedtime stories of faraway places, of Christmas past. Time had flown by. It was almost Christmas Eve. Everyone was excited. What they did not know was Mr. Salty had been busy melting all the ice around Father Christmas's home. Mr. Snowy was shuffling along when he thought that his toes were melting. Quickly, as he possibly could, he rushed back to the elves. "It has to be salt," he shouted. "Only salt can melt you in this cold weather. Look here, look at this," one of the chubby elves called. The snow is melting, he said. How are we going to get the sleigh off the ground and into the sky if there's no snow to take off with, they cried. The children started to cry. I want to go home and see Grandpa, sobbed Cassie. So do I, howled Jess. Mr. Salty was watching and giggling. That'll teach 'em, he said nastily. Why should they have all the fun? Mr. Snowy was watching with his cold black eyes. He did not say anything to the elves, but they watched him worryingly as he shuffled towards the trail of salt that Mr. Salty had left behind him. Mr. Snowy shouted over to Mr. Salty. Now you have just get away from here. You will be very, very sorry. Mr. Salty laughed. You can't touch me, or you'll melt, he shouted back across the melting ice and snow. Mr. Snowy shouted back to Mr. Salty. Yes, I will melt, and I will drown you. You will be banished to the sea forever. Mr. Salty started to shake. Oh, please don't do that to me, he cried. All I wanted is to have a happy Christmas, but all the snow melts around me. Mr. Snowy, the elves and the children felt so sorry for Mr. Salty. Everyone should have a happy Christmas, sang the elves together. I have an idea, said Rudolph. I know a place where Mr. Salty can have a happy Christmas. There is pretend snow and ice, and it's just like the real thing. It doesn't melt. He called over to Mr. Salty. Mr. Salty, if you promise to stop melting snow, I promise I will take you to a magical land of snow and ice that won't ever melt. Oh, okay, I promise. But please don't drown me, Mr. Snowy, he begged. Of course I won't. I want to enjoy Christmas too, said Mr. Snowy. Everyone jumped up and down with happiness. The air went cold as temperatures dropped. Fresh snow began to fall. The melted ice froze. Mr. Snowy's melted toes became brand new again. He wiggled it, showing off to everyone. The music played as the sleigh were prepared, all loaded up with gifts of all kinds, shapes and sizes. Christmas Eve arrived, and way up high the children were having the ride of their life. Sailing across the skies, they sat beside Father Christmas, who had steered Rudolph towards their home. Gifts for all the family were bouncing away in the back of the sleigh, and a little Robin had been dispatched to tell Grandpa that the children would be home soon. In the distance they saw Grandpa and Grandma, all their friends and family that they loved. They were all shouting and waving to the children. We are coming home, we are coming home. Yes, we are coming home for Christmas, cried the children. You'll be home for Christmas, said Santa. Ho, 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 ho. And they were. They had the best Christmas of all, and Mr. Salty had the best Christmas that he could ever imagine, skating on pretend ice. He even built his own pretend snowman. Everyone had the best Christmas ever, and they hope that you have a great Christmas too. Merry Christmas, everybody. Merry Christmas. Oh, and Santa says Merry Christmas too. And please, don't forget his mince pies.